let our art serve us.
No matter the indigenous language, international or local language, it is value.
That kind of was the tipping point in my discovery into the world of African comic book.
Black people
Love African culture. Hi, I'm Somto Ajuluchukwu, and I represent a company called Vortex Corp, a creative content company keen on exporting African culture through comics, animation, and interactive media. My first experience with comic books were as a kid growing up. I used to read a lot of Spider-Man comics. The ones that used to come with the yo-yo, that you play with that, felt like like one of the strings. And I kind of got fascinated then reading Batman comics and Superman comics and the rest of them. But shortly after becoming a teenager, I lost my passion or my interest in reading comic books, because I just felt the narrative was repetitive. We were kind of saying the same thing and it was going in the same way. But I fell back in love with comics when I discovered this comic book called Boy, produced by Panoramic Studios. That kind of opened my mind for the first time into the possibilities of African storytelling. And that was in college about 8 years ago. And that kind of was the tipping point in my discovery into the world of African comic books, and pretty much a first step in my career into producing comic books and creative stories.
Don't WhatsApp me anything, my friend. Don't WhatsApp me. I have been receiving multiple calls that you are not taking your shoot seriously.
Who said that? Who said that? I am so serious about this shoot. In fact, I am seriously serious.
I had no idea really what I was doing when I first started. I started in my first experience in making comics. I had a lot of failed attempts. And the first comic book I ever published wasn't a Vortex production, because I learned the hard way working with a lot of different artists and working with the wrong pipelines, not exactly understanding the proper procedure to go, just not designing characters first before we went into actually producing the comic books, and, not having the scripts go through the proper editorial process. So we had a lot of panels on pages, and, all those technicalities weren't there, but that was the experience I built over time. So ideally, essentially, I started between 2014 to 2015. 2014, but the first publication came out in 2015. So for like a year, we were just misfiring and making a bunch of stuff. And it gave me a bit of time to actually discover the industry. Because every single time that we fail, I'm like, I want it to look like this. And then I discover another African artist or a publisher that was doing something. And that vigor, that thirst, that grilling process of experiencing, trying to find the perfect products, kind of served as a research curve. And by the time that year was through, the year of 2014, I realized I'd known a large chunk of the industry here in Nigeria.
Oh, Shike, the mango is currently hanging from the light in my living room, and I have to say, it looks very nice.
Some of my favorite characters, I didn't even create them myself. I wasn't in the process of even creating it. Some of my favorite characters would be Juju, which was our first publication in 2015, July 30th. That was our first publication. It was a great day. I met Etubi Onucheyo as a seasoned creator, and he had Juju ready. In fact, he had done an entire issue, and it was just a couple more pages left. And that's when I met him, and that's when we engaged. And that was a beautiful process, getting that book out in terms of that. But for him, his story of creating Juju was, he was looking for pounded yam in Abuja. And the two characters are called Mortar and Pistol. And he was wondering, like, who's going to pound this pounded yam for me? And so he came up with two characters, mortar and pestle, which was used to prepare the pounded yam, if you're familiar with, like, you know, and that's how we came up with that. Building an online subscription platform was out of a necessity with the states of the industry. So individual publishers, we have a lot of individual publishers making not enough comic books. So they have one issue of this, two issues of that. And we found a need to create a central location where all African content can be consumed, where it's not too little, but it's just enough for you to constantly revisit it every month, and then you have fresh content to read, and you have a diversity of stories to pick out from. And it's also a way to unify the market, because each publisher was doing their own thing, and they had a tiny pocket of the market which couldn't sustain the business. So you find out that a lot of publishers till today are still making comic books on their own finances and not on their earnings from how much their comic books are selling. So that really was a driver. But in getting to the point where we could begin to approach publishers to partner with us, it really was by doing the publishing rights in the first place. So we started as a publisher, and we did it extremely well. And that was a process. That was a tough process, because we failed a lot of times. We had to understand, we had to do everything, starting from print comic books to print comic book sale. How can print comic books be distributed? How often can we make these comic books? And we'd gone through all the hurdles, and we'd propagated African comic books to an international stage, where we had characters like Strike Guard, which we were publishing and producing at that time, become top 15 Black characters in the world. And it was at that moment when that story came out with the comic book resources that we knew that African storytelling and African superheroes and characters had a strong place in the future. And this was way before Black Panther was a thing, having that discussion and having that placement, several more, attention from the NBC, from the Afro-Punk, and, a lot of international media had sort of keyed into the stories that we were telling. And it gave us the understanding that African comic books wasn't just for the African market, but it was a global product.
Daddy, why are we even walking? We could have just driven here.
Cassie, you are spoiled, Sha. Don't you know that the noblest thing one can do is to walk?
I'm on my way home now. I will see you at home. Yes, and we will see what happens to Ewa when I get home.